FNAF 3 came into the franchise at a very strange time, and what came after was even weirder. It was a crossroads where the animatronic horrors of the past met the cryptic uncertainties of the future. But fear not, as we delve into the depths of the game, just know that I'm here to analyze all of it. Everything is okay. You want an answer and you'll have one, but I need to cook the damn food first. Five Nights at Freddy's skyrocketed into popularity, especially once popular YouTubers got their hands on the game, and the story at that point was mostly told through not being told. Infinite theories and endless speculation was the only path towards making this game make sense, with plenty still to be left up to the imagination. FNAF wasn't only popular through the disturbing and very strange story, it was known for its jump scares. Jump scares themselves are usually cheap attempts to get you, but FNAF's saving grace was creating an incredibly unsettling, intense atmosphere that built up to each scare, with every animatronic locked behind the door being one less death, one less scare, and leading to one more dopamine hit. A YouTuber, Alan's Input, made an amazing essay on the atmosphere of the first game, so if you want to watch that, link's in the description. FNAF 2's bar was very high, but not too high to get wrong. See, FNAF 2 took most of the things that the first game got right and doubled down. More animatronics, disgusting versions of the original cast, new sounds, no doors, and the introduction of the storytelling minigames, to say the least. The atmosphere was also good, though not in the same way that FNAF 1 manages to get away with. The story minigames of FNAF 2 were some of the first direct examinations of the story the games were building up to, which was new to the series, and they would see another day in FNAF 3. But that means we have to talk about FNAF 3. FNAF 3... Where are my notes? Oh yeah, FNAF 3 came into the franchise at a weird time. At the time that it came out, March 2nd, 2015, it could have very well been the end of a trilogy of video games telling a detailed yet hard to pin down story. It seemed like, comparing FNAF to Dark Souls, that the true story of the games existed only in the creator's head, and all the fans had to come out of the woodwork and piece together a story that still might not be entirely accurate. The difference there is that Dark Souls users had to just suck it the fuck up, but for better and worse, Scott Cawthon wasn't done at 3. Still, if 3 ended the franchise right there, no other games or questions asked, we might not have to analyze it today and decide whether or not the game sucks. The answer would be staring us straight in the face. While the gameplay of the third game was jarringly different to that of FNAF 2, it would be unfair to only compare it to the other games. So only for now, until I tell you otherwise, clear that silly little head of yours from every other FNAF game. We need to first take a closer look at FNAF 3 with where it lies in the story that we knew up until that point, while keeping it absolutely detached from the other games. If you wanted atmosphere, FNAF 3 mostly nailed it in its own way. What got other players worried was, where are the other animatronics? Like I said, pretend those games don't exist for now, but I could see why it's disappointing that we went from 4 characters to 11 to literally 1. Well, that is, 1 with a twist. See, the game is obviously trying to tell you that this location hasn't seen anyone in an overwhelmingly long time. The animatronics that seem missing are there, they just don't result in an insta-kill. FNAF 3 at the beginning is nothing before you become suddenly aware that only one enemy is hunting you, this yellow rabbit, which was mostly new to the franchise outside of the vague mentions and maybe a minigame I might be forgetting about. For those that were deep in the lore at the time, the man at the other end of the phone mentioned in the second game, near the very end, that someone wore a yellow suit.
Hello. What on earth are you doing there? Didn't you get the memo? The place is closed down, at least for a while. Someone used one of the suits. We had a spare in the back, a yellow one. Someone used it. Now none of them are acting right. Listen.
And this, at the time, was the first ever appearance of the quote-unquote yellow suit. And for both those who knew and for those who didn't, this was a mystery that needed to be untangled. What is this thing? No, don't, it's not fucking Springtrap, it doesn't even have a name yet, it's some... Okay, one animatronic, and its appearances on the camera make it seem a bit sentient, similar to how the older games animatronics would look into the camera and do this thing and that and the other. But the design of the suit undoubtedly is incredible. The withered, smug little smile on his face suggests that it isn't just roaming around trying to get a bite out of you if it's convenient, but that it's actively hunting you from the get-go. And then the other, older animatronics make an appearance only to help this thing hunt you down. As you play, the minigames between nights help unravel a story a little more. The Purple Man makes a reappearance, disassembling the robots in the old restaurant one by one. Obviously, the gameplay is growing in difficulty and intensity as the story unfolds just a little bit more every night. But this isn't a lore video, you're not here for a lore video. Well, fine, the monster seems to be, at the end, the killer from the previous games, being locked in a suit, juiced to oblivion, and left to brood until you came along. It's then that maybe you notice the bits of flesh and mangled muscle intertwined with the suit, and it's after that realization that the animatronics design runs much deeper than maybe you first anticipated, filling you with horror and absolute disgust. It's effective. The space this game takes place in is amazing as well. The cameras show you bits of the old disassembled suits hung up on the walls or laying around the building, hidden in corners or put into a box in your office. What I'm getting at is that the way the story is being told is good on its own if you don't think about the other games, and if you ignore the way that some of the good ending minigames need to be played, because fuck me, this is ridiculous. But let's bring the other games back in, because this comparison is important. Five Nights at Freddy's 1 didn't need to create a story as raw as it was, but it did. Hidden away in posters on camera, or through the conversation with the man on the phone. I'm not calling him the fucking phone guy. The atmosphere was intense, unsettling, and the feeling grew tenfold with each and every night. Bodies being stuffed into suits, including the body of yours truly. The game ending means you were successfully forced into a suit, with all of its moving parts included. The game is successfully gruesome from start to finish. The second game expanded on the mostly unconfirmed story of the first, being told through similar context clues as the first, as well as with the minigames I mentioned earlier. Though I do think that the decision to make it a prequel was a glaringly last-minute decision, the game succeeds in giving players and lore freaks alike a bigger and more expansive experience than the first. Then we get to the third game. Knowing the lore, the purple guy gets into his suit, becomes a mangled mess, and having met the same fate as his victims, comes to hunt you down in a space where you're not only a stranger, you're completely unwelcome. But this game wasn't only criticized for its jump scares, or lack thereof. Am I sitting in this office, or am I fucking standing? While FNAF 2 also seemingly lacked any post-death experience to make your stomach churn, FNAF 3 should have had one. There's really nothing besides Game Over, or the canonically correct version. He got you. You died. The Springtrap is, at this point, the reason the story for the games existed at all, so, like, wouldn't it be implied something horrible would happen to you? Maybe even something just as simple as a post-death screen to add to the horror? See, FNAF 3 on its own kind of stands, and I still think it does a good job of not being a clone of the previous games while keeping what made the old games special. If the story wasn't provided in the way that it was to add on to the other games, it would be mid. Looking at the games on its own would not make it that great of a game, but seeing what it did to expand on the story made it an okay game. FNAF 3 had the chance to trump FNAF 2, because otherwise FNAF 3 suffers from third game syndrome. The second game was great, but like FNAF 3, there wasn't a post-death lore implication. FNAF 2 was what everyone wanted from a second game, but it wasn't FNAF 1, and it gave FNAF 3 the opportunity to show that it can stand its ground. The phone conversations in the third game were also fucking mid until you get to the pre-recorded conversations that add a lot more lore through context clues. I'm not here to say what I would have done differently, but only that it needed to be done differently. We didn't need the introduction to why you're there like we had in the other games. That could have lived exclusively in the open-ended, unexplained side of things. Or we could have been made aware through slight implications from the get-go that the phone conversations were recorded a long time ago. While the lore of the calls explains to us what the Springlock suit is and how multiple people suffered severe injury and possible death after several failures, it needed to start off stronger. It needed to be better. The only way that I could see how the third game would have surpassed FNAF 2 was taking what FNAF 1 did better and using only those things in concept, not just copying and pasting. So I know while Scottius Cawthon used to do a good job of making new assets and not being lazy otherwise, FNAF 3 was only good for two things: the horrific design of Springtrap and the story it expanded upon, with the nameless purple guy being trapped in a death suit, the children's spirits being freed, and this monstrous creation being locked in a hell of its own, making it as it burnt to the fucking ground. So then the answer is that FNAF 3 sucked. Hooray. Why is this video only half done? What am I supposed to talk about? You know, FNAF 3 sucking would have been my answer if we had seen the franchise be put to rest at the end. They ended the story in such a good way, but didn't really do a whole lot else. But what came after the third game changes my answer so aggressively. See, the end wasn't the end, but then in FNAF 4 it seemed like it could be its own entry. Like, what could have been a spin-off or maybe a pocket universe. Or more importantly, what should have been and stayed a separate entry in the universe, not adding on to the story going forward, but taking place in its own pocket of time in the game. A troubled child suffering in a deadly coma, reimagining those terrors coming to infringe on the safety of his own room. But in the end, even that was retconned. What the fuck is this? Whether it was for more story, more money, or more success, the game going forward absolutely sliced and diced the original FNAF story to shreds. What was originally a paranormal horror story had become something that had to be explained. Loose ends had to be tied up. More story had to be added. See, the purple guy wasn't ever named at this point in time, until the Silver Eyes book, which was okay because even though he was given the name William Afton, it wasn't actually on the same canon timeline of the original games, so we're okay.
She can sing. She's equipped with a built-in helium tank for inflating balloons right at her fingertips. She can take song requests. She can even dispense ice cream.
With all due respect, those aren't the design choices we were curious about, Mr. Afton.
Fuck me. If you want to see a very informative video of where the FNAF storyline became unhinged and overall poor in quality, there's a fantastic video by BenOverIt on YouTube, linked in the description. It's more probable that you've caught wind of FNAF from the beginning, and that you're aware of the complex and ever-changing story of the games. Or at least you're aware that the story is complex and ever-changing, and not for the better. The games should have been about a bloodlusting killer that used the safety and fun of a Chuck E. Cheese spin-off to lure in unsuspecting children and do grotesque things to them, both before death and post-mortem. It could have ended at 3. It could have even ended at 4. The setting was perfect. The age of the buildings and animatronics over time were apparent. Nothing too over the top was here besides some toy robots. So why on Scott's green earth did we go underground to a secret and more technologically advanced space with even better animatronics seeking freedom from the prisons? Why did we go underground again in a DLC for a certain game that I will never ever talk about? Why are we going forward and rewriting all of the story of the previous games? For hungry fans? Money? FNAF should have stayed a niche indie horror franchise. In my mind's eye, for the sake of storytelling, atmosphere, and development, it didn't need much more. It didn't need to rocket past what we already had. We were ready to eat when the damn food was ready, and the direction the franchise drives down was like being served some McDonald's soft serve right after a gourmet 3-course dinner. It's why analyzing the third game is a much different story now than it was at the time. FNAF 3 is stuck between a rock and an even worse series of rocks. That is why the game lies in the coffin with the first 2 games named the original trilogy, occasionally being grave robbed again and again. The designs of the later Springtraps were worse, Purple Guy being named wasn't necessary, and the game's lore now keeps repeating the same cycle of history, adding new and vague story just to rewrite and explain all of it. So then this isn't a bait and switch video essay to say that, I don't know, FNAF 3 sucked, or maybe not, it's up to you, but this is to provide the context of what happened before and after. FNAF 3 is an old gem with its issues, and even including what I said earlier about it barely living up to what it needed to do, the constant battering and rewriting of the story makes me realize that the game does not suck. I actually didn't have an answer until about 3 paragraphs ago in the script. It sucked. But seeing what's been done to the franchise and then understanding that the original trilogy had magic to them, FNAF 3 officially doesn't suck. Instead, it's a reminder to us that hindsight is 20/20, and that if the artist doesn't know when to quit, the constant milking of a franchise will run it down the road, losing many of its original fans and losing the magic and charm that it had. The lesson could be to leave good art alone, or that the artist that creates anything is too biased to understand what the good parts of the art is and why not to change them. Majora's Mask 3D suffered from the same issue. One of the most prevalent and impactful stories and games of a past generation was given new life, but the original creators were more or less embarrassed by it and weren't able to preserve what made the game so good. FNAF 3's anniversary comes soon, but I didn't want to wait for the 9-year anniversary in 2024 just to release it as a gimmick. I don't think it was very great for its time, but looking forward from its point in our time, it's greater than maybe any of us could have appreciated. Anyways, I have a Majora's Mask theory in the oven, so if you want to see what's cooking, throw me a sub. Thank you for watching this through. If you liked this, let me know somehow, and from this video to the next, this was Crazy Jake.